everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Gains for Girls podcast. Make sure you check us out anywhere where you get your podcast. Be sure to check us out at OutKick.com. Super exciting because Fox Nation is now airing my show, other OutKick shows, so you can check that out at foxnation.com. Super glad you're here. Today's guest, we've talked to many attorney generals, we've talked to other lawyers as it pertains to the gender ideology movement since the inception of Gains for Girls. But I figured it was time to get another attorney, another lawyer back on, especially given the recent Supreme Court win that we saw surrounding Title IX. But I think a lot of people misinterpreted what this really meant, what it meant for women's sports, what it meant for the harmful, severe rewrite that we have seen from the Biden-Harris administration. And so today we are having on Christiana Kieffer. She serves as senior counsel with ADF, Alliance Defending Freedom, which has been and continues to do phenomenal work. ADF, they work to expand Christian religious liberties and practices within public schools or government. They're great. I believe they're the largest legal organization advancing the God-given right to live and to speak the truth. They have 15 Supreme Court wins. I believe their win rate is a little over 80%. Christiana, she is a key member of the Center for Conscious Initiatives. She has been a key part of many cases, including the first lawsuit that I ever heard about surrounding men and women's sports with the case out of Connecticut. And so super excited for this conversation. Be sure to check it out here. Well, Christiana, thank you for joining the Gains for Girls podcast. I have so enjoyed over these past 2 years or so getting to spend some time with you at different events, different rallies, different press conferences. You really are a force of nature. And so before we get into anything, would you explain the recent SCOTUS win surrounding Title IX? I think many people saw the headline and figured that this was in game for the Biden-Harris administration's harmful rewrite. And while it was a win, the fight is far from over. I know you guys were involved in this victory. And so would you explain what this ruling means?
Yeah. Well, to take a step back for the bigger picture, just for a moment, as you know, the new Title IX rewrite was issued by the Biden-Harris administration this past spring. And to date, 26 states have put it on hold, have issued injunctions saying you're not allowed to implement that here while lawsuits are ongoing. Now, the Biden-Harris administration appealed that all the way to the Supreme Court on an emergency basis and basically asked the court to partially reinstate the rules in some of those states. So it's a very technical request and a technical response. But the good news is the court said no. The court unanimously agreed that the lower courts were right to put all of the Title IX rule, the new rule, the Biden-Harris rule, on pause while the litigation is ongoing. And while the court didn't give us a whole lot of analysis there, the good news is that in order to reach that conclusion, the court had to agree with the states, with the female athletes, and with the other plaintiffs that they were likely to show that the Title IX rule is unlawful and unconstitutional. So it's a great win. It's an intermediate win. It doesn't deal with the Title IX rewrite once and for all, but it's definitely a very hopeful sign.
Well, that's fantastic. It's wild to me that this is something that the Supreme Court has to undertake. Whether it's this, of course, we've seen cases out of Idaho, West Virginia, the Connecticut case, which was really the first of its kind. And I know you guys represented Selena Soule, Chelsea Mitchell, some of the other female athletes who lost out on, I believe it was 15 state titles because of two boys who were allowed to compete in the girls' track and field high school championships in Connecticut. And so would you be willing to discuss that case? Because again, it was really monumental and it has been foundational for over these past 5 or so years now for the rest of the movement.
Yes. So back in 2019, I started to hear stories out of the state of Connecticut about 2 male athletes that were really dominating girls' track and field. And we were put in touch with Selena, Chelsea, Alana, and Ashley, and had the privilege of, on their behalf, filing that first federal lawsuit in the nation to ensure that female athletes only have to compete against other females in women and girls sports. As you noted, those 2 males not only won 15 girls' state championship titles over the course of their high school careers, but they also set 17 new individual meet records. They deprived girls of advancement opportunities, which, as you know, for many of those girls, it was their one shot at getting into a state championship opportunity, and that was denied them. So we filed that first federal lawsuit back in 2020, and it's been a long road for these very brave young women who were ignored by coaches and school administrators and even state lawmakers. All of them refused to help them and take a stand for female athletes. So we filed that federal lawsuit, and we have been all the way up to the Second Circuit, not once but twice. And the court there finally agreed with us that these young women have a right to make their full case under Title IX, that they have had real tangible lost opportunities and lost records and lost placements, lost championship titles. And so they deserve to be able to make their full case under Title IX. So here we are. 4 years later, we are just now back down at the district court. We had a recent hearing, and the court is considering whether or not he will allow the case to move forward on the merits. So it's really been it's been a challenge for these brave female athletes, but it's been so encouraging to see other voices like yourself and others who across the country are now standing up and speaking out, and we're really starting to see some momentum, some change happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned it's a challenge for these girls. You said 4 or 5 years now, these girls have been fighting. And so, while yes, it is an emotional toll, it's a large time investment too, which I think is why a lot of people hesitate on ultimately pursuing legal action, which is why the cases that we do have forward, certainly the cases that you guys are representing, they're so important. What about athletes who have been injured in their sports? Is this something that ADF or you personally have experience in representing or at least hearing about?
So certainly I've heard a number of stories of young women. Obviously, our mutual friend who is in North Carolina, who was on the receiving end of a male's very powerful volleyball strike and suffered debilitating concussive effects. We certainly have seen the young woman in Massachusetts and who had her teeth knocked out because there was a male athlete competing on the opposing girls' team in field hockey. So there's a huge safety risk for young women being forced to compete against men, especially in these types of contact sports. The litigation that we're involved in right now, I don't believe any of our female athletes have had personal experience in being on the receiving end of those physical effects, but it's certainly a reality on the ground, and it is something that I think female athletes and parents and coaches should be deeply concerned about, especially in light of the Biden-Harris administration's attempt to rewrite Title IX and make it the law of the land for males to have access to female sports and spaces.
Absolutely. I think as a common sense, I consider myself a common sense, rational, sensible person. It's hard for me to understand the other side's argument sometimes. I understand that they're coming from a place of inclusivity. So what are some of the legal challenges that you face? I guess more plainly, what is the other side's argument in court?
So there's a couple of cases that Alliance Defending Freedom has asked the Supreme Court to take this term, which is really exciting. One out of the state of Idaho, Hecox versus Little, and one out of the state of West Virginia, BPJ versus West Virginia. Both of those cases involve states that have passed laws to protect women's sports. And they say if you have a women or girls sports team, you only have women or girls competing on those teams. So those cases are being presented. To be honest, I completely forgot what your question was initially, so sorry about that.
Fine, you're totally fine. It was just asking about what the other side's argument really is.
Thank you. Yeah. So in both of those cases, the other side is essentially arguing that to protect women and girls based on their sex discriminates based on transgender identity. And that's simply false. Women and girls under Title IX for the last 50 plus years have been protected based on their sex in order to ensure that they have fair athletic opportunities, the same types of opportunities that their male counterparts have. And in order to ensure that they have that level playing field, those athletic opportunities, not just to be on the podium, but to earn college scholarships and pursue the careers of their dreams, they must have protections based on their biological sex.
If and when Trump gets elected in November, speaking of the Title IX rewrite, I mean, is this something that can easily kind of have its course corrected? Or is there lots of damage control to do to ultimately, I mean, bottom line, ensure that no men are in women's sports, which is number 17 on Trump's platform that he issued, I believe, at the RNC and has continued campaigning on?
Well, a different administration could certainly roll back these new Title IX rule changes. But look, there's a lot of damage that's already been done by state legislatures across the country that have these gender ideology policies in their state laws. At the local level, school districts have passed these policies. So even once we're able to take care of these new Title IX changes once and for all, and I do think we'll win this, we are still facing a situation where women and girls are not protected in every state across the US. And that's something that we really want to see take place.
Absolutely. As an attorney, how has language been manipulated? I mentioned, right, we hear words like compassion, we hear words like inclusion. I think it's fairly obvious to see how it's really not inclusive to ask women to step aside and allow men onto our podiums. But even the phrasing of, I mean, the word sex itself has become misconstrued, and we have unelected bureaucrats and officials going through the back door and reinterpreting these words to mean what they want it to mean. Does that make your job as an attorney, as a lawyer, difficult?
Absolutely. It makes it really difficult to have a rational argument or even a conversation about these issues because unless we define our terms, it's difficult to know if we're using them in the same way. I've certainly been on the receiving end of briefs that were filed on behalf of these male athletes that say that their biological sex is female. And we know that that's simply incorrect as a matter of biology. It's simply wrong. They are male. And so, yes, the co-opting of the terms has made it very challenging to have these conversations, not just in the court of law, but in the public sphere, which is why I would encourage women and girls and your audience to make sure that we're using terms that are clear, use the most scientific terms available to us, and certainly not, I guess, bow at the altar of gender ideology and use these fake terms like cisgender, and the list goes on. We need to be referring to males as males and females as females so that we know what we're talking about.
I could not agree more. I think it's easy to fall into the trap. You want to be kind, you want to be respectful, of course. I mean, I do. And so at first, when I had really been thrust into this position that I'm in, I adhered to the pronoun stuff, the preferred pronouns, the biologically incorrect pronouns. I referred to myself as a biological female, which now looking back, it's really just silly. I think people are desperate for clear sex-based language. And so I couldn't agree more. I implore
Absolutely.
everyone listening to do just as you said.
And
You
let's
mentioned
be
briefs. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to comment. I just want to underscore what you said. The most compassionate and the most respectful terms are the clearest and the most biologically sound.
Absolutely. You mentioned these briefs that are being filed. What about groups like the National Women's Law Center? Surely they defend women's rights to compete fairly, don't they?
Well, let's just say that back in 2019, when we first heard about the Connecticut girls and what was taking place with the unfair competition they were facing, we sort of waited to see, well, where are the women's groups? Certainly, this is the type of case that they would be delighted to undertake to defend. Like, women have for decades fought to overcome discrimination and to be able to have that fair playing field, to have those access to education, athletic opportunities. And so it was very telling when none of the women's legal groups were willing to take a stand with actual females for female opportunities. And I think it's something I would love to see them turn around.
Absolutely. I saw a video on X just recently. Actually, I saw it because Elon Musk commented on it. I believe he commented something like, this is insane, and this is coming from, he is a parent with a child who unfortunately has gone through hormones and social transitioning at least. but he said something to the effect of this social mind virus is spreading throughout Western civilization, but it was on a case that you guys are representing. I believe it was out of a Swiss court. If you know the case I'm talking about, it was about parental rights. It was really powerful, this video that I saw. I also saw another video, I believe it was Dan and Jennifer Mead, in a case, I think it was Mead versus Rockford Public Schools. So lots of different cases regarding parental rights right now. Would you be willing to just touch on the importance of course, parental rights and maybe some of the details of these cases?
Sure. Yeah, so I just would underscore how insidious this ideology is and how it has permeated so many layers of our society, including school districts, for example. So in the Meads situation, they had a middle school daughter who was being secretly transed at school. The school district was using masculine pronouns, masculine names for her, and intentionally hiding that from her parents. Even though the parents have been working closely with the school district to address a number of mental health concerns for this young woman, and come to find out they were, in essence, perpetuating that by pushing her towards this transgender ideology. I've also seen situations where a young woman was on a school trip to Washington, D.C., and was assigned to share not just a hotel room, but to share a bed with a male fellow student who claimed a female identity. And the parent, she stepped away. She secretly called her parents and asked for help. Look, this is so wrong, so deeply wrong. The Swiss case that you mentioned, there was a young woman who was 16 years old, and her parents were attempting to get her the mental health support and assistance that she needed. And the Swiss courts found that to be insufficient because they were not willing to provide her with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and other interventions to push her towards a transgender identity. So it's deeply concerning to see. It is a violation of parental rights. Like, the individuals who love these children more than anyone else in the world and have their best interests at heart are being really shut out of the process as the ideology is being pushed and foisted on their kids.
Absolutely. You guys are doing phenomenal work as it pertains to, of course, the topics that we talked about, the gender ideology movement, parental rights, but also religious liberty, free speech. And so we couldn't be more grateful for you personally, and again, for Alliance Defending Freedom. How can we support you and ADF and follow along with ongoing and future cases?
Absolutely. Well, I'd encourage you all to visit adflegal.org, where you can find out more about our litigation, the Title IX lawsuits, the gender ideology, parental rights lawsuits, and so much more.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Christiana.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to check out adflegal.org to check out the work that they are doing, the critical work that they're doing. Really, like I said, I've just been honored to be involved with them in different capacities over the past few years. Wonderful people, wonderful organization. Again, check us out at OutKick.com. Follow Gains for Girls anywhere where you get your podcasts. You can check us out now at FoxNation.com, and we will see you again next week. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. The fight to save women's sports and restore common sense is far from over, and I continue the conversation every week. So make sure to catch more content over here and subscribe to OutKick so you don't miss a thing.